Hi guys, happy Tuesday. We are going to continue talking about China, but this time we're going to look at it in more of a global take, and we're going to look at it by comparing it to the United States. We're going to look at just the population of each one, the political structure, the economic systems, and then we're going to look at some kind of territorial and political issues that the two countries are facing. I thought it would be a good idea to do this just to give us a little background text and like more recent issues involving China and the U.S. before we get into the more ancient stuff and figure out how China got to where it is. So, without further ado, we're going to look at geography first. In terms of total land area, China and the U.S. are pretty close. I believe in terms of total land area, China is four, or no, the U.S. is four and China is five. And so the U.S. has about 9.8 million square kilometers of total land area, and China has about 9.5 million square kilometers. So they're pretty close. I mean, you can kind of see on the map here, just kind of if you put the two countries on top of each other, what they would look like. And so that's kind of a size comparison of the U.S. and China. A couple of things that we want to look at is physical features. In China, they have the two important rivers we talked about yesterday, the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. And in the U.S., the biggest river that we probably think of is the Mississippi, which runs right in through here. If you remember, the Yellow and Yangtze goes this way through China. So each country has its own kind of pretty big river system. The U.S. has the Rocky Mountains out here, and China has the Himalayan mountains along its southern border with India and Nepal and those countries. So there's kind of just a physical geographic comparison between the two. Now let's look at population. If you remember when we were talking about India, China is the world's largest country in terms of people. China has right around 1.4 billion people in this country. In the U.S., the last estimate I saw was right around 330 million or so. If you also remember from yesterday, we talked about how most of the people in China live in the southeastern portion of the country down here. If you look at the U.S. population, and both of these are population density maps. If you remember from yesterday, we're looking at how many people live in a certain square mile of land. You can kind of see here in the U.S. how our population is kind of tightly controlled right in the eastern northeast, New England, down in Florida, up in through along the Great Lakes, and then you have a lot of empty space out west, kind of like China does. Um, a difference, though, is that we actually have a pretty sizable population on our western coast, in this case, the West Coast, whereas China doesn't really have that. Most of China's people are literally right in this area here, whereas the U.S., we have a few pockets of heavy population density, notably along the eastern coast right here, the Great Lakes, Florida, and then out west in Southern California and the Bay Area, San Francisco and Oakland, those areas. In terms of military personnel, I thought this was an interesting one to look at. The United States currently has about 1.3 million active duty soldiers across all the branches. And China has just under 2.2 million. So China has almost a million more people in its armed services than we do. And I thought it was surprising that given a country with a population of 1.4 billion only has 2 million people in its military. If that kind of surprised me. So Jen, just looking at these population density maps, you can kind of see where most people live in the United States and then where most people live in China. And it kind of follows a similar pattern with the exception of the western coast here. As far as political structure goes, this is where there's a huge difference. China is officially a communist country run by the National Communist Party. That National Communist Party chooses the president of China. They have a national assembly, but it doesn't really have any real authority in the country. And at the local level, China is broken down into provinces, which are essentially just states. Now, the United States, on the other hand, is a democratic country which operates a federal system. Um, as you all just saw with the recent election, we have what's known as an electoral college system, which chooses the president of the United States based on the popular vote of the respective states. We do have a Congress or assembly similar to China's national one, except ours is chosen by people like me, your parents, those older people, 18 or older in the U.S. I believe, yeah, in the U.S. it's 18 or older. We also have individual states which run things at the local level, Indiana, Ohio, that kind of thing. Similar to provinces in the case of China, but the states have a little bit more freedom because of the system that we operate in, this democratic system. States have a lot more flexibility in how they do things compared to provinces in China. As far as economic systems go, if you remember way back when, beginning of the year, back in August, we talked about different economic systems. One of those that we talked about was a mixed market economy, which both countries technically run. A lot of people are surprised when they find out that China doesn't have a command economy. If you remember, command economy was where the government runs everything, and there are little to no private businesses. For a while, China was like that. Recently, though, China has begun to open its economy to foreign investment and private ownership of businesses. That all happened because in the late 80s, early 90s, and then it really took off after the global financial crisis back in 2008. China really opened its economy up to foreign investment, foreign companies, foreign workers, that kind of thing. And because of this, China's economy has absolutely skyrocketed in the last 10 to 15 years. Now China is a leading competitor in all kinds of different industries, such as clothing, toys, technology, electronics. Like, odds are some of your clothes, your shoes, your phones, your iPads, like all that stuff is probably produced in China because of China's booming economy and its cheaper labor practices. The United States also operates a mixed market economy but the difference is, even now, the U.S. has far more public companies and foreign investments than China does, by far. China has the advantage, though, in that it can attract cheaper labor to run its factories and other things that the U.S. just simply can't do. So the last thing we're going to look at is kind of some political interests between the U.S. and China. Recently, within the last year or two, the United States has accused China of unfair trade practices. And in response to these, the U.S. government under President Trump has passed or enacted a series of sanctions on Chinese government officials, Chinese companies. One of the more notable ones was they banned U.S. companies from working with a Chinese telecom company, like a Chinese phone company, like a Chinese version of Verizon or AT&T. The U.S. government said that company could not operate in the U.S. because of fear of security concerns. And the U.S. has also imposed tariffs on Chinese goods. Tariffs are just simply taxes companies have to pay on foreign goods when they come in the U.S. So if you have a tariff on something, when it arrives in the U.S., whoever ships it in has to pay basically a tax to bring that into the country. And a lot of times tariffs are extraordinarily high and cause the price of things for people like you and me when we go to buy them to be higher, because a lot of times the companies pass those costs on to us. So the U.S. has done this, and China has responded in kind. So the U.S. and China are kind of in the middle of a trade war right now. As far as territorial concerns go, China has been very active in this part of the world right here. China, no, dog tried to eat something. So China has been active in the South China Sea, basically claiming that all of this outlined in red right here belongs to China. China owns this. They have rights to it, that kind of thing. If you notice, the countries in yellow here, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, the Philippines, also lay claim to this area. And under like international laws, these countries in yellow have a better claim to this territory than China does. But China, being the bigger country, the bigger military it has actively went about taking over a series of islands in the South China Sea here. They've even gone as far as building man-made islands and putting military airstrips and military bases on these islands to kind of further their claim that they own this. This hasn't sat well with these countries, obviously, the U.S. included. Recently, the U.S. has sent warships and other military personnel to the region to kind of show China that, like, you can't just build an island and claim it's yours like this. So this is kind of an ongoing dispute between the U.S. and China and over this little area of the world here. It's important for shipping purposes and trade and that kind of thing. So that is actually all we're going to look at today. If you need me to read the questions for the assignment, I'm going to do that here shortly. If you don't need that or you don't want to listen to that, you're good to stop the video here. If you're good, I will see you all. Have a good rest of the day, and I'll see you all tomorrow. If you're sticking around for the questions, I'll start reading those now. Question 1, true or false? China has more total land area than the United States. Question 2, describe the population densities of each country. How many people are in each country, and where do they mostly live? Question 3, explain the political systems in each country and how they are similar and different. Question 4, both countries operate what kind of economic system? Mixed market, a command, or a traditional? And then question 5, describe some of the territorial and political disputes between the U.S. and China. So that is the quiz questions for you all today. If you guys have any questions with these, shoot me an email, let me know. Other than that, I hope you all have a good rest of the day, and I will see you all tomorrow.